Hey guys, what is up? So today, it's actually about 1 in the morning right now, but so last night when I was making my video for you guys, I was thinking, well, after I'd already taken all that footage, I didn't want to make the video too long so that it's more convenient for you guys. So I remembered that I forgot to include all of the bait that you guys are going to be wanting to use that are included with those tips and those tricks that I told you guys, and I even have some more tips and tricks that I forgot to mention in my last video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is going to be primarily about the bait that you want to use for targeting the different species of primarily striper, black drum, and a little bit of red drum mixed in here and there. But without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So guys, generally if you are surf fishing, more specifically along the Delmarva coast up near Ocean City, maybe into Delaware a little bit, you're primarily fishing for striper, and so the surf fishing season for striper and even mixed in a little bit black drum is usually April through June. So that's the time of the year when you guys are typically going to want to be going out and surf fishing, because you have a much higher chance of catching the striper on their run from the Chesapeake Bay up all the way to New England. So for baits for the striper fishing April through June, you're going to want to use bunker. So bunker is a type of fish that you can usually find fresh around that time of year. You can also use spot or mullet that are normally going to be frozen. Sorry guys. But you can also use peeler crabs, sand fleas, and other crustaceans that you would normally find in that part of the ocean. So fishing is like experimentational. So if you're going and you're throwing in peeler crabs and they're not working, then maybe grab some sand fleas and throw them in. Or if that stuff isn't working, you can use some artificial bait, which I'll get into in a minute. All these baits are great. The spot, the mullet, and the bunker, they're whole fish, so you're actually going to have to cut them on spot. We call it cut bait. So if you ever hear that term used anywhere, know that it's when it comes in a whole fish and you normally cut it. Guys, if you are using cut bait, don't throw away the head. A lot of people do that, and it's a really, really bad idea, because the head is actually one of the most prized parts of the fish. When you're fishing, it's a great piece to use. You'll generally hook them. Sorry guys, I don't know what's going on with my throat this morning. You'll generally hook them through their lower jaw, up and out their mouth. And that's a great hook, especially if you're going for striper or black drum. A lot of anglers will typically use sand fleas because they're cheap, they're easy to find. You don't have to go buy them at a store. You can just go right on the beach where you're fishing, and you can dig some up really easily. So just look for after the wave crashes and is going out, that line where the wave starts pulling back into the ocean, after it pulls back in, just take a shovel, dig, throw the dirt over, and you'll see a bunch of sand fleas there. And they're really great bait to use, especially for black drum. A lot of black drum mainly will eat crustaceans. So a lot of those crustaceans, the peeler crabs, the sand fleas, they're great bait for fishing black drum, because that's primarily what black drum will eat. Another important thing to note about the sand fleas that I forgot to mention a second ago is that after you capture them and you have them in some sort of container, you don't necessarily have to put sand or water in there, but make sure that their urine and their excrements can drain, or else they will actually die fairly quick on you guys, and I don't want that to happen to you, so I just wanted to make sure to include that. So if none of this cut bait or these crustaceans are working for you guys, and you want to try out some artificial bait, a great thing to use is a clam or crab flavored fish bites. You cut a strip of this. You can get it at your local Dick's, or I don't know if your local tackle shop will have it, but I know Dick's has it. And you cut a strip of that, put that onto the hook, and then fit as many sand fleas as you can on the hook. That's a great rig for black drum. And then you're going to want to keep in mind, you're going to want to use a relatively thin but large hook, because you're wanting to fit a lot on there, but you don't necessarily need the weight. If you're trying to catch some black drum out there, that's a great setup. And if you're looking more for striper, you can do the same thing with the fish bites and the sand fleas, except use a higher caliber hook, because striper fight a lot more than black drum do. Even though some black drum are bigger, most of them are typically in the 20 to 30 pound range, but some can be as big as 50 pounds. Striper are a lot more muscle. They have a lot more muscle than the black drum, so they take off a lot harder, and you don't want that hook to snap. So you want a thicker hook for the striper rig. So another thing, guys, is you guys can decide what rig you think works best, where you're fishing. But along the Delmarva coast, what I have found to be the best rigs, what I've seen other anglers use, what I've talked about with other anglers, what I've heard was very successful, especially for striper, it's the fish finder rig. I will be making a video about that tomorrow at some point, about how to make that rig if you're doing it on your own, or you can buy one online. They're not very expensive. It just might take a little bit to get there. But if you'd rather make one of your own, I will have a video coming out fairly soon, tomorrow, or if I'm busy, because tomorrow's New Year's Eve. Maybe New Year's Day I'll have a video coming out. But, you know, since you know, you decide what rig works best in your location. But those are the two, and the high-low rig. That's the other one that I've heard a lot of anglers talk about, works specifically well for striper. And in my experience, the high-low rig has worked great for striper, not for much else. I haven't caught many other fish on that. Another thing is that you're definitely going to want to have a sand spike. My sand spike is made of PVC with a bolt drawn through the end of it, and I stick it in the sand, put my rod in that when I'm waiting for a bite and I have my line in the water. You don't want to be using like a cooler or a chair, because you can get your rod yanked in the water super easily. In one of my other videos, I have a story about how that kind of happened to me, and I lost my rod. I never saw it again. And it was a really nice rod, and it's a good idea to buy one. You don't want to makeshift your own. Or if you are going to makeshift your own, because I'm not trying to tell you guys what not to do, I'm just trying to coach you in what has worked for me. In my experience, you want to buy one. You don't want to makeshift one, or if you're going to makeshift one, you have to make it really good and make sure that it works. Like, I would test it out. I'd stick it maybe in the dirt near your house, and I'd grab the line without a hook on it, obviously, safety first here, and I'd pull it and see if it just yanks right out completely. Because if it does and you have a big fish on the line, your rod can get yanked into the water so easy. And then you're not going to see that rod again, and you're not going to get to see that fish. And that's just disappointing, man. Another great tip that I can give you guys for when you're preparing to go out to go surf fishing: find out when the low tide is on your beach. If you're fishing in Ocean City, the lifeguards on the back of their lifeguard chair, if you go out to the beach during the day, they should have the low tide on the back of their lifeguard chair. And so find out when that low tide is. If it's really early in the morning, guys, you don't necessarily need to do this. But if it's like midday to late day evening is the best time that it can be. And then, because then the high tide's obviously going to be around 6 o'clock in the morning, which is a good high tide time, when the sun's starting to rise. It's not too early that you're not going to want to get out there if you're not serious. surf fishermen. But if you get out there around 6:30, and that's a little bit before high tide, that's great, because you want the high tide coming in and going out. That's the best time to be fishing. But during that low tide, guys, you can go out and you can look at the beach. And so on the beach, look for like not stuff that like kids made and like sand castles and stuff. Don't look for that type of stuff. Look for the nicks, the grooves, the crannies. Especially look for any sand belts that look like they're jutting out into sea, because during your high tide, you're definitely going to find fish on either side of these belts, because it's a great cool spot that the fish like to hang out in and swim along. So that's always a great place to cast your line during the high tide. But anyways, guys, just go out and look at the beach. Just survey it, kind of like see where those different areas are, so you can get a better feel of where to cast your line during the high tide. So the best time to be surf fishing, guys, is usually 2 hours before high tide, especially if that high tide is at dawn or dusk. As I mentioned before, it's a really great time to be fishing if you can go out at 6:30 and high tide is at 7 or 7:30, because that is a great time to get the tide coming in. And earlier that previous day, around midday, you'll be able to go out and survey the beach really easily, because it'll be at a nice time. There won't be a lot of kids playing on the beach, and you'll be able to really take a good look at the surroundings. Another great thing that you guys can do, and I cannot stress this enough in my videos, is go talk to other anglers. Go to a bait shop. Go to a local shop that maybe sells fishing equipment. And go out there and talk to them, asking stuff like what baits has been used, what bait are a lot of fishermen using, asking for when are they going out, where along the beach are they fishing, stuff like that. Any good questions that you guys would have. Other anglers are your greatest resource when you're going to a place that maybe you haven't fished a lot before. Or maybe you go there all the time, but this is your first time going in that year, or even in a month or so. In 1 month, where the fish are can change a lot, and it can vary between your trip being a very successful trip and one where maybe you catch 1 or 2 fish in your whole trip. And that's not a great trip, guys. You're aiming to really, for like 4 or 5 hours, 3, 4, 5 hours of fishing, you're going to want to at least catch 6 fish. And if you're not doing that, I would suggest going asking, hey, this is what I'm doing, do you see anything that I could maybe improve on in this, or anything that you think I should change? And then you guys don't have to just specifically listen to them, but make sure to take it into consideration. If you really think it's a bad idea, you don't have to do it. But other anglers that maybe are there all the time might have a better idea of what the fish are looking for at this point in the year. So just make sure you guys are out there asking other anglers. They're your greatest resource. I can't stress that enough in any of my videos. Another thing, guys, is don't overcast. A lot of people think, oh, you have to cast crazy far out there. I saw one time, there was a guy, he casted like 300 yards out. I was like, that's way overkill. Sometimes the fish can be as close as 20, 30 yards in front of you, and you're casting way over them, and you're not catching anything, because it's not where the fish are. So you don't always have to overcast and cast out there super far, because the fish are a lot of the time a lot closer than you would think. So another thing that I would recommend to you guys is using braided line. So it's a lot harder for the fish to tear up. So if you get a bluefish on the line, because bluefish have teeth, a lot of anglers will tell you they hate bluefish, because when they're trolling in the water for striper out in a boat, the bluefish will come and they'll tear up their rigs, and they'll completely waste rigs that can sometimes even be up to like $100. So a lot of anglers hate them. But if you have a bluefish on the line, they're not a bad fish to fight, but they can tear up your line really easily. So I would recommend using a 20 to 30 pound braided line. It's not gonna be too heavy. so you'll still be able to cast pretty easily. But then again, it's going to be tough, so it's not going to be as easy for the bluefish or any. If you were to catch like a kingfish on there, they have some teeth. It's not going to be as easy for them to break it off. Now, if you're not, that is if you're not using a steel leader. If you're using a steel leader, you can use pretty much whatever type of line you'd like. Just make sure that connection between the steel leader and the line is very secure, because you don't want that coming off. If you have a really good fish on there, it can be really annoying, guys. Trust me, I've had it happen to me. I've had a big fish on the line. One time, I had a kingfish on the line. I was out on a pier. I was reeling it in and slipped right off, and I was so annoyed because it was a really big kingfish, and it was one of my first times out here fishing on this pier. Nobody else was catching much. They were all watching me. It was bad experience, guys. So just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're tying your knots really tight, or if you're not doing that, make sure that you use the braided line. 20 to 30 pound braided line is what I would recommend for that type of surf fishing. Well, anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching my video today. I hope it helped you guys out. I hope I was informative, and I hope that I answered some of your guys' questions that you had. If you have any more questions, you can leave them for me in the comments. I will try to get around to them as soon as possible. Please, please, please smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, and most importantly, fish on.